next, it's time for Truth or Fake. Catalina Marceau-Dabru is here in studio. Catalina, you're taking us back to our top story this evening. We'll be fact-checking Donald Trump's latest claims about the war in Ukraine. Tell us more.
That's right, Sharon. Let's begin with these statements made by President Donald Trump today, who gave remarks on Ukraine at his Mar-a-Lago residence. We hear him saying that the U.S. gave Ukraine $350 billion.
We gave them, I believe, $350 billion, but let's say it's something less than that, but it's
so as he says, a bit less than that, perhaps. He continues to say that Europe has given a very much smaller percentage in aid, about $100 billion compared to the $300 billion so that was given from the U.S. President Donald Trump has continued to insist on this number, even in writing, even some hours ago on his Truth Social and on X, where he continues to say that President Zelensky talked the U.S. into spending $350 billion to go into a war that couldn't be won. So it's actually a lot less than $350 billion. There are many numbers swirling around regarding the exact number of U.S. contributions to Ukraine. We'll be using the numbers published by the Kiel Institute for the World Economy. They have their own Ukraine support tracker that shows that the U.S. actually allocated about 114.2 billion euros or $119 billion, give or take, but not $350 billion per Donald Trump's claims. This graph also helps us debunk vis-a-vis his comments regarding Europe, where he says that the U.S. gives more aid to Ukraine than Europe. You can see that according to the same study, Europe has allocated about 132.3 billion euros or $137 billion in help for Ukraine, ahead of the 114 billion euros from the U.S.
And what about the missing aid money that President Zelensky was speaking about last week, Catalina? Donald Trump talking about it now.
Well, President Donald Trump made reference to these recent remarks made by President Zelensky on February 2nd, where he says that Ukraine only received about $75 billion of the $175 billion that the United States had allocated for aid to Ukraine. Following this statement, people started to wonder, so what happened to the other $100 billion? Was it lost, stolen, corruption? The short answer is no, as President Zelensky was also explaining in this video. Only part of this aid goes through Ukrainian control. In fact, according to many research institutes, most of the military aid that U.S. Congress approves for Ukraine is actually spent in the United States. This number would be about nearly 70% of the $175 billion was actually spent in the U.S., according to this study by the American Enterprise Institute, published in 2024. While the CSIS gives a similar figure, they say that about 72% of this money overall will be spent in the U.S., claiming that this notion of aid for Ukraine is a misnomer or an inaccurate designation, since most of this aid money is actually spent in the U.S. The reason for this high percentage is that the weapons that go to Ukraine, here in blue, are actually produced in U.S. factories, as shown in this graph by the CSIS. Hence, $100 billion not missing. The $175 billion are actually divided into these 7 categories, accounted for a large part that went to these activities in the U.S. that arose because of the war in Ukraine, but that were not spent in Ukraine.
Finally then, Catalina, Donald Trump also claiming that President Zelensky's approval rating has fallen to just 4%. Is there any accuracy in that?
Indeed, here we have President Donald Trump claiming that Zelensky's approval rating has fallen to 4%.
Has been blown to smithereens.
So it's unclear what source the president was citing, as he didn't provide any evidence, but a survey conducted this month by Ukraine-based Kyiv International Institute of Sociology found that 57% of Ukrainians said that they trusted the president, which, as they note, is slightly up from the 52% in December. However, this is down from the 77% at the end of 2023 and the 90% in May 2022. So suggesting that President Zelensky has suffered a drop in his popularity. However, accurate surveys and polling is extremely difficult to carry out in time of war, as most Ukrainians and politicians believe that now is not the right time for elections during martial law, as the country focuses all of its internal efforts to fight the war against Russia.
Catalina, thanks so much for all of that. That's Catalina joining us there with tonight's Truth or Fake. Well, that's it from us for now. Do stay with us, though. We'll be right back with more world news.